Chapter 1. I still remember the exact moment my marriage ended. He came home late that night. I heard the front door open long after it usually did, and something inside me tightened before I even understood why. The house had already gone quiet in that heavy, expectant way it sometimes did when I was alone with my thoughts. Then came his footsteps, slow, uneven, like he was carrying something he didn't want me to see. I knew. I didn't know what, not yet, but I knew something had shifted. Matt didn't come straight into the living room. He stopped in the hallway first. I heard nothing for a while, no rustle of his jacket, no keys dropping into the bowl, nothing. Just silence stretched too thin. I kept my eyes on the television, though I wasn't really watching it anymore. The light flickered across the room, painting everything in soft, meaningless motion. And then he appeared. He didn't take off his jacket. That detail stayed with me, oddly sharp in my memory, like he didn't intend to stay long enough for it to matter. "Matt," I said, already hearing the change in my own voice. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, looking at me like he was measuring the distance between us, like he was deciding how much truth I could survive. My chest tightened. Something cold moved through me, quiet, certain. "Matt," I tried again, softer this time. Finally, he walked in and sat down, but not close, not like he used to. And that's when I knew this wasn't about work, or stress, or money. This was about us. "Emily," his voice was low, careful, "we need to talk." My stomach dropped so fast it almost hurt. "You're saying that like I should be scared," I said, forcing a small laugh that didn't belong in the room. "I don't want to scare you," he replied immediately. I can't keep this in anymore." There it was, the breaking point. I sat still, waiting for the next words to shape themselves into something normal, something survivable. But they didn't. "I don't want the baby," he said. For a moment, I genuinely didn't understand. It felt like my mind refused to process it, like the sentence hit a wall inside me and shattered there instead of becoming meaning. "The baby," I repeated slowly. He nodded once. And then he kept talking, not about us, not about our marriage, but about my pregnancy, about the child I was carrying, like it was separate from everything else, like it was already an ending instead of a beginning. I remember staring at him, waiting for him to correct himself, to shake his head, to say he didn't mean it like that. But he didn't. "I'm not ready," he said. "Maybe I'll never be ready." I exhaled, trying to steady myself, trying to find something logical to hold on to. "Matt, it's normal to be scared," I said gently. "We both are, that doesn't mean." "No," his voice cut through mine, sharper now. "You don't understand." Something in his tone made my skin go cold. And then it all collapsed in a way I still can't fully describe. "I love someone else." The words didn't land at first. They floated there, unreal, absurd, like they belonged to someone else's life, not mine. I actually laughed once, a short, broken sound. "Someone else," I repeated. "Who?" His silence was worse than the answer. And then I already knew. "Laura," I said, my voice tightening. "Your coworker, Laura." His expression changed, just slightly, but enough. Enough to make it real. Something inside me snapped, clean and immediate. "That Laura," I went on, my voice rising now. "The one you always said couldn't do her job properly." "Emily," he started. "No," I stood up without realizing I was moving. "Don't you dare Emily me right now." His face went pale. "It just happened," he said, like that explained anything. Like that erased intention, like that erased me. "Just happened," I repeated slowly. "So now you're in love with her." He didn't deny it. That was the worst part. I felt my hands trembling, but I curled them into fists so he wouldn't see. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice dropping lower, sharper. "You're telling me your pregnant wife, is suddenly just, what? You changed your mind." "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying, Matt?" He ran a hand through his hair. exhaling like I was the problem. "I'm tired," he said finally. "Tired of hiding it. I love her. I want to be with her." "And what about us?" I asked. "What about our marriage, our life, our baby?" "That's exactly what I'm talking about," he said, as if I were the one missing something obvious. "I can't do this halfway. I can't be here when I don't want to be here." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were loud. Because they were final. "I'm asking for a divorce," he said. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The room tilted, not physically, but in that strange way reality does when it stops behaving the way it should. "You're asking me," I whispered. Then my voice broke. "You're telling me you've already decided." He didn't answer that. "I can't be the husband you need," he said instead. "And I can't be the father I'm supposed to be if I stay like this." My laugh came out again, but this one had no sound in it at all. "You don't get to decide that alone," I said. "I already did," he replied quietly. And just like that, something inside me went completely still. Not calm. Not acceptance. Just silence, deep, suffocating silence, where everything I thought my life was supposed to be stopped making sense at all. Chapter 2. Matt was 32. I was 28. We had been married for 4 years, together for 6. Sometimes it didn't feel like we'd had enough time together for everything to fall apart. Not like this. Not us. We had started out in a cramped studio apartment where the heater rattled in the winter and the windows never quite sealed properly. Matt was just starting out at his company, working an entry-level job and talking about sales like it was a distant city he was determined to reach. I was fresh out of college, chasing interviews in shoes that weren't meant for that much walking, pretending I wasn't terrified of not finding my place. We were broke, constantly. We ate whatever was cheap, counted every dollar, argued sometimes over nothing important just because stress had nowhere else to go. But we believed in each other. That was the strange thing. Even then, even in all that uncertainty, I never questioned him. I never questioned us. When things finally got easier, when his promotions started coming and my job stabilized, we didn't rush into luxury. We saved. We talked about the future like it was something solid we were building brick by brick. A wedding, a house, a family. And then my aunt left me a house. It felt like luck, like timing, like life was finally giving us something back. We moved in and renovated it ourselves. Painted walls late at night, argued over tile samples, laughed when nothing matched but convinced ourselves it still worked. And almost immediately, we chose a room and said, "This will be the nursery." We didn't even hesitate. We wanted children, not abstractly, not someday. Ours. I used to imagine everything so clearly it almost hurt. Matt coaching Little League on weekends, muddy shoes and a sunburned neck, yelling encouragement from the sidelines. Me hosting barbecues in the backyard, family gathered too loud and too close, kids running through the grass until they collapsed from exhaustion. I wanted what I had with my sister. Sarah and I had grown up like that, close enough to share silence without it feeling empty. Our parents moved out of state when I was younger because of my father's job, but it never felt like abandonment. Not really. We called constantly, stayed in touch, and still talked all the time. I also had Sarah there, so I was never really without family. We stayed each other's anchor. Sarah had her own life now, a happy marriage. 2 kids, my nephews, wild, loud, perfect little disasters I adored. Matt had been part of that life from the beginning. He used to love them in that easy, natural way that made me think he was already halfway to being a father. He would play with them for hours, lifting them onto his shoulders, letting them drag him into games he pretended to lose just to hear them laugh. He used to be like that. I looked at him now, sitting across from me in our living room, and I couldn't find that man anywhere. When did he become a stranger? There was a time when I could read him without effort. I knew his moods by the rhythm of his footsteps in the hallway. I could tell, just by the way the door opened, whether I should expect exhaustion, irritation, or that quiet, tired softness he only ever showed me. I knew him. Or I thought I did. "Emily," he said again, more firmly this time. But I wasn't listening anymore. My gaze drifted around the room instead. Our couch, the one we picked out together after spending an entire afternoon arguing over fabric samples like it mattered more than it did. The blanket folded over the back, because one of us always ended up falling asleep there. Everything still looked like us. That was the cruel part. Nothing had changed enough to warn me. We had been happy. I wasn't imagining that. There were dinners, routines, inside jokes, quiet evenings where nothing extraordinary happened, and that was exactly what made it feel like home. We drank tea together every evening without even thinking about it. Watched movies we never finished because we always fell asleep halfway through, tangled together on the couch, warm and safe in a way I once believed was permanent. Everything was real. Until it was. I exhaled slowly. If I had to name the beginning of the end, I could. It started with a name. Laura. The new hire at Matt's company. At first, she didn't exist in any meaningful way. Just a passing mention, like background noise in a conversation that didn't matter. "We got a new girl at work," he had said one evening, tossing his jacket over a chair without looking at it. "She doesn't understand anything, keeps asking the same questions over and over." I remember smiling. It sounded like him, annoyed, impatient, already mentally categorizing someone as inefficient. That was Matt. He had always been demanding, of himself, of others, of the world in general. "What's her name?" I asked casually. "Laura." 25, blonde, loud, according to him. The kind of person he said didn't understand boundaries or basic professionalism. I didn't think anything of it. "She'll figure it out," I said, pouring him some tea. "I'm not her babysitter," he replied immediately, like the idea itself offended him. And then it started. Not all at once, not in any obvious way. Just pieces. He began talking about her more often, not in a way that felt important at first, just complaints, frustrations, the kind of things people say about coworkers they find irritating. "She got it wrong again," he said one night, dropping onto the couch beside me. "I don't even know how else to explain it." "Maybe she's just nervous," I suggested. "Or just not that bright," he said with a shrug. We even laughed once. I remember that clearly. We laughed like it didn't matter. Like she didn't matter. But something still shifted. He started staying late. First it was a deadline, then helping someone adjust, then simply work. No explanation beyond that. No details, just absence repackaged as responsibility. And he stopped talking to me the way he used to. There was a time when he came home and I got everything, the entire day, unfiltered. Frustrations, small victories, complaints about people he barely tolerated. Now I got fragments. "How was work?" "Fine." That was it. Sometimes I tried bringing her up again, lightly, almost carelessly. "How's that new girl doing?" He would pause, just long enough for me to notice. "She's getting better." That was new. Not irritation. Not dismissal. Something else. Patience. And I hated how quickly I noticed it. Or maybe I hated the part of me that noticed it but still wanted to believe it meant nothing. One night, he came home later than usual. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard the lock turn. "You're still up?" he asked quietly. "I waited for you," I said, sitting up. He nodded, but he didn't come closer right away. No kiss, no touch, no familiar ease. He went straight to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water, like he needed distance before he could face me. "How was your day?" I asked. "Hard." A pause. Then I said it without thinking. Was it because of Laura? The change was immediate. Not dramatic, not obvious. Just a stillness. A fraction of a second, where something inside him shut down. "Partly," he said. And in that moment, I felt it. Not understanding. Not certainty. Just a quiet, sinking awareness I couldn't yet name. Like something inside the house had just unlocked itself. And I was the only one who had heard it open. Chapter 3. Of course, I could feel something was wrong. I had been feeling it for weeks already. It didn't arrive all at once, like people sometimes imagine these things do. There was no single moment of impact, no clear break, no dramatic shift I could point to and say, that was when it started. It came the way illness comes. Slowly, quietly, almost politely, until you realize it has already settled inside you. At first, it was small things. The way Matt looked at his phone a second too long before answering me. The pauses in conversation that stretched just slightly beyond normal. The calm in his voice when he said everything was fine, when nothing about him felt fine at all. I noticed, I always noticed. But I didn't let myself believe it meant anything. Not because I was naive. I just knew him, or I thought I did. 4 years of marriage had to mean something. It couldn't just dissolve into suspicion overnight. It couldn't turn into a stranger standing in my kitchen and calling it love. Marriage wasn't just paper. It was routine. It was shared silence in the mornings, coffee brewed for two without asking. It was arguments that ended with us still choosing each other at the end of the night. It was a promise. At least, that's what I believed. I didn't think he could betray me. Not like this. Not when I was carrying his child. That thought alone should have protected me. It didn't. Because he had wanted this baby. That was the part I kept coming back to, over and over again, like repetition could anchor me to something solid. I remembered how certain he had been. We used to talk about our future baby late at night in that tiny studio apartment we once called home. No space, no money, no certainty about anything except each other. I think I'd spoil a girl, he had said once, lying on his back, staring at the ceiling like he could already see her there. Completely, no chance of survival. I laughed. You'd spoil a boy too. No, he said seriously. A boy I'd raise properly, teach him things. Like what? How to be a decent man, he said, then turned his head toward me with a small smile. Although that part might be your influence more than mine. We used to laugh easily then. Everything felt far away enough to be safe, like time itself was on our side. And then it wasn't just talk anymore. It became intention. He was the one who brought it up first. I think we're ready, he said one evening, completely casually, like he was suggesting dinner plans. I remember asking him again, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. Are you serious? He nodded without hesitation. Yes, I want this with you. And I believed him. Completely. There was no doubt in me at all. I remember another moment, too, when I didn't think mattered at the time. We were in a baby store buying something for my nephew. Matt wandered off without thinking and ended up in the newborn section. I found him there, holding a pair of tiny socks between his fingers like they were something fragile and unfamiliar. Look at this, he said quietly. How is something this small even real? I laughed, but he didn't. He just kept looking at them. Then he moved on to strollers, pushing one slightly forward and back. This one's solid, he said, though maybe too heavy. We're not buying anything yet, I reminded him. I know, he said, but he didn't put it down immediately. We left that store with something unspoken between us, a future that suddenly felt closer than it should have. And then it happened. The day I took the test. I still remember standing there, holding it in my hand, my entire body locked in that strange space between fear and hope. He was in the other room. Matt, I called. He came out immediately, already alert. What is it? I didn't speak. I just handed it to him. For a moment, he didn't understand what he was looking at. His eyes moved from the test to me and back again. Emily, is this? I nodded. And everything changed. I saw it happen in real time. Shock first, pure, unfiltered disbelief, then silence like his mind had stopped long enough to catch up. And then, a smile. Real, immediate, uncontrolled. "Are you serious?" he asked, like he was afraid the world might take it back if he said it too loudly. "Yes," I said. He laughed once, broken and breathless, and pulled me into his arms so tightly I could barely breathe. This is incredible," he kept saying, almost disbelieving it. "We're going to have a baby. We're actually going to have a baby." He said it like he needed to hear it again and again, just to make it real. That night, he didn't let go of me. Not once. He talked about the future as if it were already unfolding in front of us. He told me he would be there for everything, every appointment, every moment. He said we would figure it out together, no matter what. He was happy. I saw it. I felt it. I trusted it. And now I was standing in front of that same man. Same voice, same eyes, same hands. And he was telling me he didn't want our baby. The words didn't feel like sound anymore. They felt like weight, something dropping slowly between us, hitting the floor without echo. For a moment, I couldn't breathe around it. And in my mind, the two versions of him overlapped until I couldn't separate them anymore. The man who held those tiny socks like they mattered. The man who smiled at me like I was his future. The man standing in front of me now, destroying both of them with a single sentence. "I don't want this baby," he said again. And something inside me didn't explode. It didn't scream. It simply gave way. Quietly, completely, and beyond repair. Chapter 4. I felt physically sick. Not in a metaphorical way. Not in the way people say it when they're overwhelmed or upset. It was real, sharp, and immediate, like my body had turned against me before my mind had even finished processing what had just been said. The air in the room felt different, heavier, thicker, like I was breathing through something I couldn't see but couldn't escape either. There was a dull pounding behind my eyes. My stomach had gone hollow in that cold, nauseating way that makes you feel unsteady even when you're standing still. I couldn't stay there. I turned and walked into the kitchen. Too fast, almost stumbling, not fully aware of my own movements. I just needed distance. Something ordinary. Something that didn't involve him standing there, looking at me like my entire life had just been rewritten without my permission. Tea. That was the first thing my mind offered me. Ridiculous, automatic comfort. As if boiling water and a mug could fix anything. My hands were shaking when I reached for the kettle. I filled it anyway. Watched the water rise, slow and indifferent, like the world didn't know anything had changed. Like nothing had been shattered in the other room. Switch on, mug out, tea bag ready. Simple steps, safe steps. Something moved behind me. Of course he followed. I didn't need to look to know it was him. I felt him in the doorway, his presence no longer familiar in the way it used to be. It used to feel like home. Now it felt like something I didn't recognize in my own space. The kettle started to boil. That rising sound filled the kitchen, sharp and steady. And for a moment, I focused on it too hard, like if I held on to it long enough, everything else would stop existing. But it didn't. He stayed there in the doorway, silent. That silence pressed harder than anything he could have said. I poured the water into the mug carefully, watched the tea darken as if nothing in the world had changed at all, as if I hadn't just been told something that split my life in half. "Do you remember?" I asked finally. My voice came out quieter than I expected. He didn't answer. I turned around. He was standing there with his hands in his pockets, uncomfortable, restless, like he didn't know what to do with his own body. His hair was slightly messy, his face tired. But not guilty. That was what hurt the most. "Do you remember how you said you wanted a baby?" I continued, forcing myself to keep speaking. "How we went to the store, the baby section. How you picked up those tiny socks and stared at them like they meant something." His gaze flicked away. I took a step closer. "You wouldn't even put them down," I said, my voice tightening. "You said they were too small. You laughed and said you couldn't believe something like that was real. My throat burned, but I kept going anyway. The stroller, I added. You were already talking about it like it mattered, like we were already there buying a stroller. He exhaled, slow and heavy, and ran a hand through his hair. That familiar gesture, stress, avoidance, distance. I hated it now. The test, I whispered. Do you remember that, how you looked at it, how you smiled? My voice broke slightly. How you held me like it was the best news Dee ever heard. Silence again. And now what? I asked. The words felt thin, fragile. 3 months, Matt, I said, more firmly now. I've only been pregnant for 3 months, and you're telling me you changed your mind. He closed his eyes for a second, like he was bracing himself. Then he exhaled. Emily, he started, you have to understand, I've fallen in love with someone else. I stepped back without thinking. I really love her, he said. The way he said it was almost gentle, controlled, like he was trying not to hurt me more than necessary. As if that was still possible. She's a good person, he added. And something in me reacted violently to that phrase. A good person. As if that explained anything. As if it softened the blow. As if it made betrayal acceptable. I tightened my grip around the mug until my fingers hurt. I couldn't even smell the tea anymore. And me? I asked quietly. He froze. The air between us tightened. Am I a bad person, Matt? No, he said immediately, too fast. No, of course not, you're. Then what is it? I cut him off. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. What makes her worth this? What makes her worth losing everything we built? He didn't answer. That silence was worse than anything he could have said. Something sharp rose inside me then, not rage exactly. Something deeper, heavier, something that didn't burn out quickly. You want to be completely free for her, I said slowly, as if I were trying to understand the words myself. Yes, he said. Simple, certain. No hesitation. And that was it. That single word didn't explode anything. It just ended it. I nodded once, slowly, like my body had decided for me. Then I turned away and set the mug down on the table. Carefully, deliberately. Because I knew if I kept holding it, I would lose control of my hands completely. They were shaking harder now. Everything inside me had gone unnaturally quiet. Too quiet. Like the world was waiting for me to react, and I didn't know how anymore. I stared at the table for a long moment before I finally spoke. Then it's clear, I said, even though nothing felt clear at all. Except one thing I couldn't unsee. He wasn't mine anymore. Chapter 5. I looked at him, almost carefully, like I could still find something familiar in his face if I studied it long enough. But there was nothing new there. Same eyes, same features, same man I had built a life with. And still, it felt like someone else was looking out from behind them now. What are you suggesting? I asked. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He hesitated, looked down for a second, like the floor might help him find the right version of himself. It's not too late, he said. Something inside me tightened immediately. Not too late for what? I asked quietly. I already knew. I knew before he finished the sentence, before he even fully formed the thought. But I let him say it anyway. Because I needed him to say it. Out loud. So it would stop being something I could pretend I misunderstood. It would be better, he exhaled, if you ended the pregnancy. For a moment, the world didn't react. There was no dramatic collapse, no sound, no movement. Just stillness. What? I whispered. I actually thought, truly thought, that I had misheard him, that my mind had twisted the words because the real version of them was impossible. But he was looking at me. Directly. Seriously. Like he wasn't asking, like he was proposing something reasonable. I changed my mind, Emily, he continued. I'm not ready to be a father. I fell in love with someone else. You understand that, right? She matters to me. This isn't just nothing, it's real. It would be easier if I just left completely. His voice sounded distant now, detached, like the words weren't even his anymore. So why complicate things, he added. A child from someone who doesn't want it. I stopped hearing him properly after that. Not because he got quieter. Because something inside me simply shut off sound. I stared at him, waiting for him to correct himself, to flinch, to take it back, to look horrified at his own words. But he didn't. He meant it. He was actually suggesting it. As if my body was a problem to be solved. As if my child was an inconvenience he could edit out of existence. And then something shifted inside me. Not loudly. Not violently. Just completely. A strange clarity settled over everything. Cold, precise, unmistakable. A woman protects her child first. It wasn't a thought. It was instinct. I need to think, I said finally. My voice sounded calm, too calm. He searched my face like he still had access to me. He didn't. Leave, Matt, I added. A pause. Emily. Please, I said, just leave. This time, he listened. He turned and walked out. I heard the front door close. And only then did I realize I had been holding my breath. Even after he was gone, the tears didn't come. I went upstairs instead, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at nothing for a long time. Then I picked up my phone. I called my sister. She answered on the first ring. Emily, are you okay? That was enough. My voice broke immediately. Everything came out at once. No structure, no restraint, just truth spilling out in fragments I couldn't stop. She didn't interrupt me. She just listened. When I finally finished, there was a pause on the line. Then she said quietly, I'm coming. And she did. Not long after. She sat beside me and took my hand like she had always known how to hold me together when I couldn't do it myself. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked at her for a long moment. And for the first time that night, I felt something steady underneath the chaos. I'm not going to destroy my body for his change of heart, I said. My voice didn't shake. It's over. If he wants a divorce, he gets one. She nodded slowly. And the baby. My hand moved instinctively to my stomach. A quiet, protective gesture. He can't force me to terminate the pregnancy, I said, and he won't. A pause. But I'm not going to force him to be a father either. My sister studied me carefully, like she was trying to understand where this strength was coming from. I don't want anything from him, I added. No alimony, no child support. I have a job, I have a house. Her expression softened. Aunt would have been proud of you, she said. I nodded slightly. She would have been. My aunt had left me the house. Sarah had inherited the cottage outside the city, with the land she always wanted. Somehow, even in that, life had been fair to us in its own quiet way. We had both gotten something we could stand on. But I still needed protection. Not out of revenge. Out of necessity. In case he changes his mind again, I said quietly. My sister straightened immediately. I know a lawyer, she said, a very good one. I didn't hesitate. Call them. The next day, I was already sitting in that office. The lawyer listened without interruption. No judgment, no shock, just attention, precise and professional in a way that made everything feel more real and less like a nightmare I might wake up from. We drafted everything carefully. Clear terms, clean lines. Matt would relinquish parental rights. I would not pursue child support or alimony. The divorce would be uncontested. The separation complete. No lingering ties. No ambiguity. Just an ending. The house stayed with me. Shared accounts were divided. And that was it. 4 years of marriage, reduced to signatures on paper. The next day, while I was at work, Matt moved out. He left his keys on the kitchen table. He didn't see me. He didn't try. We handled everything through lawyers after that. And 2 months later, we saw each other for the final time. As husband and wife. He felt unfamiliar. Not like a stranger exactly. Worse. Like someone I once knew very well who had chosen to become unrecognizable. He looked wrong. Not happy. Not free. Just hollow in a way I didn't expect. You would think leaving a marriage for someone else would come with relief, with certainty, with clarity. It didn't. His smile was there, but it didn't belong to him. Too wide, too controlled, like something he was performing rather than feeling. And his eyes. Empty. When we signed the final documents, his gaze dropped briefly to me. To my stomach, now visibly changed. He hesitated. "Do you know yet?" he asked quietly. "Boy or girl?" I didn't answer immediately. Then I simply shook my head. "Emily." I looked at him once. Then at the papers. "That's not your concern anymore," I said. And I walked out. Chapter 6. After the divorce, my life didn't fall apart. It narrowed. Not in a painful way at first, more like everything unnecessary slowly slipped out of focus. Noise faded. People's opinions stopped reaching me with the same force. Expectations, explanations, justifications. They all drifted away until there was almost nothing left but what was real. It was unsettling in the beginning. And then it was. I stayed in the house. The same house where I had once built a life with Matt. The same rooms, the same walls, the same light falling through the same windows. Only now it belonged to me alone. At first, the silence felt too large for the space. Too heavy. Like it was waiting for someone else to fill it. But over time, it stopped feeling like absence. It started feeling like protection. I didn't change my routine. Not really. I still made tea in the mornings. Still walked through familiar streets when I needed air. Still left music playing in the background even when I wasn't listening to it, just to avoid complete quiet. But something in me had shifted permanently. My focus narrowed to one thing. My child. My baby. Her. Yes, she was a girl. When the doctor confirmed it, I remember smiling. I wanted her, completely, without hesitation, without conditions. Even when the circumstances of her coming into this world had become complicated. Even when her father had looked at me like she was a problem to be solved instead of a life already growing. Especially then. I made my choice. Every single day. Again. And again. I was waiting for my daughter. Not nervously, not emotionally. Just quietly. Like something inside me had finally settled. A girl. Mine. After that, she became real in a different way. At first, she was only sensation, faint movement, like a whisper I wasn't always sure I had imagined. But then it grew stronger, more distinct, more impossible to deny. Alive. Inside me. At night, I would lie in bed with my hand resting on my stomach, just listening. To my breathing, to the subtle changes in my body, to her presence growing steadily in a world no one else could see. It is a strange thing to realize you are no longer one person. That there is another life sharing your body, your time, your future. I didn't cry. I didn't reach out to Matt. I didn't allow myself to look back. And I didn't look for him either. 4 months passed like that. Carefully measured, controlled, protected. I forced myself not to search for news about him, not to check anything, not to reopen doors I had already closed. But life has a way of letting things reach you anyway. I heard it, of course. That he had started seeing her openly soon after moving out. His colleague, Laura. Even before the divorce was finalized, people seemed to know, or assume, or whisper. I never asked for details. I didn't need them. Still, I had to remind myself more than once not to think about it, not to let it take root inside me, not to let it touch what I was building instead. So I didn't. I tightened my focus even more, until there was only one direction left in my life. Forward. And then the birth came. Chapter 7. The contractions started at 4:30 in the morning. At first, I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that it would pass, that it was just another false alarm, another wave I could breathe through and ignore until it faded. But it didn't fade. It sharpened. Within minutes, I understood this wasn't something I could reason away. My body had already made the decision before my mind caught up. I woke my friend, who had stayed over. She sat up instantly. No confusion, no hesitation, just immediate awareness. While I was still trying to orient myself through the pain, she was already on the phone with my sister. Her voice stayed calm, steady, anchored in a way mine was. And that steadiness kept me from falling apart before I even left the house. We went to the hospital right away. The car ride felt unreal. Every turn, every bump in the road pulled me further into something I couldn't control anymore. I remember staring out the window, trying to stay present, trying not to let fear take over completely. I failed at that more than once. My sister met us there not long after. She didn't ask questions. She just took my hand and held on like she had already decided she wasn't letting go. Time stopped behaving normally after that. It became something broken, stretching, collapsing, disappearing. There were only fragments. Breath. Pain. Waiting. And then breath again. Hours passed like that. Until at 2:14 in the afternoon, my daughter was born. A girl. The first sound she made cut through everything inside me. Not loudly. Not violently. Just undeniably. Alive. Something in me broke open at that moment, not in destruction, but in recognition. Like my entire life had been moving toward that single breath and had finally arrived. They placed her on my chest. Warm, wet, real. I looked down at her and couldn't understand how something so small could feel so complete. Her fingers curled instinctively. Her face was still new to the world. Her breathing uneven, but steady. She was here, and I was no longer alone. Her name was Clara. I said it through tears I hadn't even realized had started falling. Clara. It felt right immediately. Like the name had existed long before I ever spoke it. The room didn't matter anymore. Nothing outside that moment mattered anymore. Not the past. Not him. Not what had been broken to get here. Only her. My daughter. Clara. And the ones who showed up when everything else fell apart. I had thought I would be alone in that room. I had prepared for it, accepted it even, built myself into someone who could survive it. But I wasn't alone. My sister Sarah was there first, still in whatever she had thrown on when I called her. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her face pale, her eyes already wet. She held my hand, and then reached for Clara like she couldn't quite believe she was real. "Hey, Clara," she whispered, like she had known her all her life. Her husband, Colum, stood behind her, holding their youngest while their older son pressed his face closer to the bassinet, staring like he wasn't sure he was allowed to breathe too loudly near something so fragile. "That's your cousin," Colum said softly. "Be gentle." The boys watched her like she was something sacred they didn't yet have words for. My nephews hovered between excitement and awe, whispering questions no one really answered, because there was no need to. Then my phone lit up. A video call. My parents from Florida. My mother was already crying before I even said a word. My father tried to stay composed, but the moment he saw Clara, something in his expression cracked. "She's here," my mother kept saying. "She's finally here." They were already on their way to the airport. Not later. Now. Then came Nora. My friend, who had stayed beside me through every night when the silence felt too heavy to carry alone, and especially when it came time to bring my daughter into the world. She had driven me to the hospital the night before and stayed there with my family. Nora stood near the window, holding a hospital coffee she had forgotten to drink, tears slipping down her face as she didn't even try to hide them. After that, my colleague arrived straight from work, still in office clothes, slightly out of place in a room that didn't belong to deadlines anymore. She brought flowers she had clearly grabbed in a rush and kept saying, "I didn't want to miss this." Even my boss came briefly. Awkward at first, then softer when he saw Clara, like something in him remembered that life existed outside of work. Column's parents arrived too, bringing that calm presence some people carry without effort, the kind that doesn't fill a space, only steadies it. The room became full. Not loud in a chaotic way. Full in a human way. Voices, hands, warmth. Life gathered around something new. And in the middle of it, I understood something simple. I wasn't alone. Not then. Not anymore. And he wasn't there. Clara's father wasn't in that room. But when I looked at my daughter, I realized something else just as clearly. She wasn't missing anything. Because she had me. And that was enough. A few days later, we were discharged. I carried Clara out into sunlight that felt too bright after the hospital walls. The air outside was colder than I expected, sharp against my skin. I instinctively held her closer, protecting her from everything. She slept most of the way home. Small, quiet, unaware that her life had already begun changing the moment she came into the world. And then life continued. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just forward. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Final paperwork. Legal, official, irreversible. Matt's name was gone. Completely removed. No rights, no obligations, no recognition as her father. Just absence, written into law. I sat at the kitchen table, holding those pages, while Clara slept upstairs. I read them twice. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I needed my body to believe what my mind already knew. It was finished. Not just emotionally. Legally. After that, life became something quieter again. Same house. Same routines. Same morning light across the kitchen floor. The nursery remained unchanged. The room we had once planned together, before everything fractured. I never altered it, because it no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her. To Clara. To the sound of her breathing at night. To the beginning of a life that had nothing to do with what came before. When Clara turned 1 month old, I invited people over. Not an event. Just a gathering. My parents came first. My mother couldn't stop looking at Clara like she was afraid to miss even a second of her existence. My father stayed quieter, but his expression softened every time he looked at his granddaughter. Sarah came with Colum and the boys. The children ran through the house until they stopped in front of Clara, suddenly careful, suddenly aware of something delicate. Nora arrived, and the moment she saw Clara, she pulled her into her arms, already loving her too much to be casual about it. My colleague came after work, still half in her professional mindset, but smiling like she had already stepped out of it. Even my boss stopped by briefly, more relaxed than I had ever seen him. Colum's parents came too, steady and grounding, the kind of presence that doesn't interrupt a moment, only completes it. Clara slept through most of it in my arms. 1 month old. Completely, unaware she was the reason everyone had gathered. Someone took a photo that evening. Nothing staged, nothing planned. Just life. Later, Nora posted it online and forgot, genuinely forgot, that Matt still had access through her profile. So he saw it. And he wrote. At first, messages. Then more. He said Clara looked like him. That she was his little copy. I read that phrase more than once. His little copy, as if she were something that belonged to him by resemblance alone. Then came the question. Could he see her? I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. No. Just that. No explanation. No opening. Because there was nothing left to negotiate. She was my daughter. That was the only truth that mattered. And apparently, the only one he refused to accept. A few minutes later, I added, "You gave up your daughter 6 months ago." Then I put the phone down. After that, things escalated. Messages, calls, attempts to show up uninvited. He became a problem again, but not in my heart. In my boundaries. The first time he came, I saw him through the window. He stood there, as if he still had a place in my life. I didn't move. Eventually, he left. The second time, I didn't even go downstairs. The next time he showed up, I met him outside. It wasn't dramatic. Just close enough to feel wrong. And he broke down. Right there. Not in anger. In desperation. He said my name like it could reverse time. Like it still had power over me. I looked at him for a moment. And I felt nothing that belonged to the past. Only distance. So I turned away. And walked back into my life. He stayed behind, watching me go, as if there were still a version of reality where I would turn back. But there was. Some endings don't happen all at once. They happen in layers. Slow, quiet, final. He had chosen his path when he walked away. And now he was only living inside it. That night, I called my lawyer. My voice didn't shake. Not once. I got a restraining order. I heard later, through Nora, that things between him and Laura had collapsed. That the relationship he had once called the love of his life had already turned ordinary, unstable, forgettable. The certainty he left for didn't survive real life. And suddenly, there was no one left to anchor him. No alternative life waiting. Only consequences. But by then, it wasn't my story anymore. It was just the echo of something I had already outgrown. Chapter 8. It ended right there. And it had nothing to do with revenge. I never woke up thinking about hurting him. I never replayed that night in the kitchen like a weapon I could use later. His words, the steam rising from the tea, the way he stood there speaking about my pregnancy as if it were something negotiable. That was never who I became. It wasn't about him. It was about what he destroyed in me in a single moment. Because when he said it, calmly, almost casually, that he didn't want our child, that it would be better if I ended the pregnancy, that he was in love with someone else. Something inside me didn't break slowly. It stopped. Completely. Like a thread cut without warning. There was no recovery after that. No soft transition. No gradual fading of love into disappointment. Just silence. He became a stranger the moment I understood what he was asking of me. And I realized something very simple. Strangers do not belong in my life. Especially not in my child's life. Not because I was consumed by anger. Not because forgiveness was impossible. But because there are lines in life that, once crossed, change who a person is to you forever. You don't unsee them. You don't soften them just because time passes. He made his choice. And I made mine. Sometimes, when I look at my daughter, I think about the future in a way I never allowed myself to before. About what it might look like for her. And I know, without confusion, without desperation, that one day she will have a father figure in her life. Not necessarily by biology. By choice. A man who shows up without hesitation, without calculating whether it's convenient. Someone who lifts her into his arms like it's the most natural thing in the world. Someone who teaches her how to ride a bike, who laughs when she makes mistakes instead of correcting them too sharply. Someone who doesn't disappear when life becomes inconvenient. Someone who chooses her. Consciously. Every day. I believe in that possibility. Not as a fantasy, as something that can exist. And if it doesn't come, we will still be okay. Because happiness has never been about numbers. It has always been about presence, about who stays, and how you build your life with what remains.